Morning, YouTube folks that are on here. If you are still coming up on my computer, there we are. Get the link, tweet it out, come back, hit record, and away we go. Hello there, and welcome to the Hawk Fanatic Hawkeye Hotspot podcast. It is Thursday, September the 19th, a little after 9 a.m. Central Time. I am Rob Howe, joined by Scott Docterman from The Athletic. We're going to talk Iowa, Minnesota mostly, look back a little bit at Troy and kind of what that means going into the Big Ten season. But Scott, I wanted to start with as I didn't know how this would play out, this podcast, with you being going to be a national college football writer at The Athletic as opposed to being the Iowa exclusive writer for The Athletic, but this is working out well. You, I'm guessing, are the only person that's covering Iowa this week that has covered Minnesota already this year. So that's an advantage to us. And then also, I think it's cool you get to do some different things and have an opportunity like last Saturday to, watch different games and you get the benefit of seeing teams around the country, but then also what's being said about those teams. And that's what you wrote about. Not to spend a lot of the podcast on this, but kind of how has this gone for you so far through the first 3 weeks of the season? And what was Saturday like, not being at Kinnick and probably seeing on Twitter everything going on and not being in that action?
That was really difficult. I'll be honest with you. Waking up when there's a home game, it's just like my body tells me what to do. It's
Me too, and my body's not as kind as it used to.
Yeah, I know. Now it smacks me in the face. Get up! But it's just like you have this routine in place, and it's like, okay, I'm like expecting to, take the same drive, the same route, the get to the stadium at the same time, all that stuff. So when I'm looking at the clock and it's like it's 11 o'clock and the game's at 3, I'm like, all right, I should be getting closer to taking off, and I'm not. I'm watching LSU in South Carolina and Alabama, Wisconsin, and it's really awkward. And so it was a little challenging to do that. I think it was probably for the best, though, last week that, well, it was kind of like a rip off the Band-Aid moment. My bosses said, this is what we want you to do this day. And I'm like, well,
and if you're going to pick an Iowa game,
yeah.
I mean, if it was, you don't want to miss the opener.
Right.
You're certainly not missing Iowa State. You don't want to miss a conference game, most likely, unless we'll see what happens here. But Troy was the game, it seemed like.
Yeah. And I think part of that was, hey, they're 1-1. They lost Iowa State. Troy's 0-2. We don't think that, because I'm writing to a broader audience now. And so, not that Iowa's not important, because it certainly is. I'm going this week. I'm going to Ohio State. I'll be going to a lot of the home games the rest of the way. But, for a game to kind of, all right, let's do something different. This is certainly the one. So I had to watch games from 11 a.m. all the way past midnight, all the way into the Cal game in San Diego State late in the game. So, I DVR'd a ton of them. I would watch like, a couple series with one game, or when the commercial hits, I'd go to another one, back and forth. And it was really interesting. The perspective is different because we're so trapped here, fans, media, everybody on, like, oh my God, Iowa looks so bad in the first half that the whole world's watching, which they really aren't, because I'm going back and forth going, oh yeah, I got to get back to that game, and now my eyes were constantly on Iowa. I just, it's natural, but
did you have multiple TVs going?
I did, or
like a laptop? And
I was watching some on my phone, but I was also just primarily just, South Slope has a great setup, so I was going back and forth. Now I'm going to have to upgrade the TV, I think, and at least get a pup or something like that, just to do a little more, because I'll be doing some of this more in the future.
So explain to the listeners kind of what your assignment was. I know you talked about it last week, but people may have missed that. And then kind of what you took out of that, just in terms of maybe not what people are saying and things like that, but just kind of, as you said, the vibe elsewhere outside of our bubble.
Yeah. My assignment was I had to do the top 10 list on the commentators for the week. And we kind of traded off. We've had a couple of different people do it the first few weeks, and now it was my turn. I don't know if I'll do it again this year, maybe. But it's to watch as many of the games as possible and rank the crews. And of course, ranking the crews, you got to try to marry what they're doing to the action on the field and how they're commenting on it, how they're reporting it. And, it was really fascinating. Like I watched a lot of Georgia, Kentucky on Saturday night, number one team. And they're it felt like one of those Kinnick games when they're playing Michigan or something where it's a fist fight. And I was trying to see, okay, how are they calling this game? And it just, for me, I kind of downgraded them. I thought that there wasn't a lot of urgency. I didn't think that they maybe respected Kentucky's chances enough, or they were leaning too much on the SEC is just too dang tough on the road, and this is what happens. And instead of giving me details, why is this happening? What makes this unique? Because last week Kentucky lost 31-6 at home to South Carolina. And it was pretty much like that throughout the game. And then I also wanted to see what happened in blowouts. And the funniest one by far, there wasn't even close, was the Tennessee game on the SEC network. They were playing Kent State, who happens to be playing Penn State this week. And it was 65-0 at halftime. And middle of the second quarter, they started talking about the body farm, like Tennessee's campus, and just how, all these corpses are there and everything. And then they started talking about maggots. And I'm like, whoa, this is getting a little deep for me. And so
you would think if somebody was going, all right, we need to have some filler for this one, you wouldn't start there.
No, there was a lot of filler because it was like 44-0 with like 12 minutes to go in the second quarter. I mean, it was just an absolute annihilation. And then I think it was Tom Hart, the play-by-play guy, goes, I didn't think we were going to have this conversation until the second half. So, but in following the Alabama-Wisconsin game and following LSU-South Carolina, which took forever, and just a bunch of other Colorado State at night, and all these other games, along with I did watch Iowa not only live in segments, but rewatched it, of course, in its entirety the next day. You see that it's just a piece of the mosaic, is what I could say. Iowa is one piece. It's not a ranked team. They're people that have modest interest. Like, okay, and then they look at the final score, and where everybody here is dissecting it, we all are like, oh my God, they allowed 21 points, all these big plays. How can they be doing this? But then if you're the casual, even sports writer, you're going, they won 38-21.
And you move on.
It's not a big deal. Just like take your pick out of any of the other games, and a Southeastern Conference opponent, whatever. It's the same thing. And I will say Jesse Palmer talks too much, but
he appears to be a guy who enjoys to hear himself talk.
That was
it's the Food Network.
Yes.
I mean, dude is everywhere.
That was my least enjoyable game to listen to.
Who was that? What game was that?
It was Texas A&M, Florida.
Okay.
And with Jesse Palmer and Joe Tessitore, who I think is okay. Some people don't really like him. That's fine.
He goes a little over the top for me sometimes, but I think he's informative.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like your taste. What do you think? And then with Palmer, though, it's like, you get through the 8 to 10 seconds of game action, and then Palmer would have to fill it from 10.1 seconds all the way up to the snap. And it's like, just sometimes you just say, gosh, I even mentioned that I would have liked to have muted the game at certain times.
Tough to do your job. Yeah. It would be tough to do your job not listening to anything.
I know. So it's like, that was my cue. All right, go to West Virginia Pitt for a little while, and just stuff like that. But no, anyway, it's an interesting perspective because it gives me a broader perspective, and being able to watch a lot of the Big Ten games, Indiana, UCLA, Wisconsin and their issues, and and on, Purdue and Notre Dame. that was a SEAL clubbing, and so you have all of that. It gives you a real broad view on where things stand with Iowa, and then when rewatching Iowa, when compared to everybody else. Yeah. And this my takeaway was Iowa's a pretty good freaking football team. Iowa just has some things it needs to clean up, not to sound like Ferentz, but when you look at they've given up 5 touchdowns in 3 games, which isn't that big of a deal. 4 of them are on big plays. Clean up the big plays. They're capable of doing that. The punt was an issue because punter didn't punt it in the right direction. Kirk threw the return or the attack unit under the bus, which I'd expect. Move on. 3 big long pass plays. Those are things that if you have a coach on staff that you figure can get that figured out, it's Phil Parker.
Yep.
And then you look at it and go, quarterbacks went 20 of 24 passing, really? And you have the nation's leading running back and rusher, and you have 7 explosive. He has 7 explosive run plays of 25 plus yards. Things look pretty good for Iowa, and all the angst I saw at halftime. And I understand they were losing and they gave up some big plays. I thought, let's wait on this. And then looking back, rewatching it, seeing the way Iowa, other than the big plays, truly dominated that game, I'm probably more bullish on them than I even was going into.
All right. So there's a lot to unpack here. We got to get to obviously looking at, how Iowa and Minnesota match up. But from just a broad picture to continue on with our discussion, and I know you keep track and have been writing about kind of how things are developing in terms of as we get to the first college football playoff rankings and getting to that point and who's in, who's out. This is almost like an elimination game, isn't it? Specifically for Iowa. You have 2 losses and you're going to Ohio State. I mean, yeah. So again, I don't like the term must win, but if Iowa loses this game, it completely changes the complexion of this season. You've got a bye week thinking about going to Ohio State and needing to win that game to have any chance of making it to the playoff.
Yeah, you cannot lose this game, period. If you want to think about playoff, this is it's not only an elimination game, it is, dare I say, a must-win situation because
for both, right? Because Minnesota lost to North Carolina. Not that they're a college football playoff contender, but I mean, everybody has that dream still at this point if you're in a Power 4.
Exactly. I mean, the only thing you could dream about then would be getting to the Big Ten championship game, and that's awfully tall task. I mean, for any team, except for Ohio State, but but for an Iowa's case specifically, beating, you have to beat Minnesota because you just can't say, and then we'll take care of business at Columbus. I mean, because the last time that happened, I was a senior in high school in 1991. Now. They've had some competitive games. 2 years ago was not that, but in the past where they've had a puncher's chance, I think that they're capable of putting together a good game against Ohio State, but I'll never predict them to win. But that said, this team needs to put together a 4-quarter game. It needs to put together a game where they feel good at every level, and it's setting up in that direction if they play well, that if they put together a 4-quarter game, they're going to get a nice win. They will have a week off. They can reevaluate how things have worked. They can hone in on the things that go well. They can adapt or throw away the things that don't. And then you can put together a really good game plan for what I think is the best team in the country on the road. The only true Big Ten opponent that Kirk Ferentz has never beaten in their stadium. So, and by the way, that would also be win number 200 in his Iowa tenure, which would rank him second all time in Big Ten history. So there is a nice path here if all that goes well, but you cannot, of course, step out on a limb and say, oh yeah, and then we're going to beat Ohio State. It all starts with winning back, Floyd. And doing that this weekend against your oldest rival, one of your most bitter rivals, and somebody who really gave you a controversial, maddening loss last year.
In prime time.
On
NBC.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, this is a big one. This is one whereas last week where people weren't tuning in to watch Iowa play Troy, Saturday night, there will be eyes around the country looking at Iowa. Voters, people that are on the college football playoff committee. This is one that has a little bit more exposure. And therefore, in addition to, winning the game, you want to look good in doing so. You don't want to, you don't want a 6-3 game or something like that, 9-6, because that's just, even with a win, then you lose at Ohio State. You got 2 losses. You beat Minnesota by 3 points. You scored 9, whatever. This game is just, to me, it's that's kind of been the main thought in my head is just this is always a big game, and this game has so much more significance because of the new landscape of college football and schools like Iowa and Minnesota trying to get one of those 12 spots. And, in an 18 team league, this is just so important. And I think you have two teams that lost their non-conference difficult game, Power 4 game, and then they both had just easy opponents. So we really don't know much about them going into this game either. So when you look at, do you have a handle on kind of what the process is going to be like, how this is going to unfold for the 12 teams, Scott? Like, can a 3-loss team get in? How many 2-loss teams are going to, just from a math standpoint, what do you think the breakdown will be roughly? I know you can't pinpoint it.
Yeah. First, just to go back on one little thing here is that this is a statement game for the country too, because if you now that Iowa's offense is actually not bad, because everybody still remembers last few years. They remember the Big Ten championship games where they didn't score or they scored a field goal. That you're on prime time, you have the nation's leading rusher, you go out and you win 31-0, and you dominate. Then the conversation changes about Iowa, and that's a big important thing, I think, because then people are saying, okay, maybe Iowa is better now. Now they got rid of Brian Ferentz and they have another offensive coordinator. That Iowa looks different, and that's really important. But then going forward with the college football playoff, you already know 5 of the 12 spots are taken.
Right.
By 4 power conference champions, and then the best non-conference or group of 5 champion. So then you look at, and what I've analyzed every Wednesday so far is different aspects figuring into the at-large part of it. Which this week was how much do rivalry games matter? And non-conference rivalry games, and then how much in the past it was like which 1-loss teams have kind of sirens, and which ones are like, hey, they're still in all right shape. And I had Iowa I tiered that off. I had Iowa in like the second group. Like, it's concerning. They still got a chance. Not like Notre Dame or LSU, which if they take care of business, they'll be okay. But you've got to be, if you're Iowa, based on your schedule and your reputation, and style of play, you've got to at minimum be 10-2. And even then, that's not a guarantee, because the SEC has a clear advantage in a couple of areas. They only have 8 conference games.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a major separation. The top tier is really good. We saw it with Alabama just annihilate Wisconsin, who looks really bad, especially with Tyler Van Dyke out for the season. You got Alabama, you got Georgia, you got Ole Miss that's ranked high. You've got Missouri, who's ranked high. You've got Tennessee, who may be the best of them all. In fact, I think they're underrated. I know I'm going to miss somebody here or there.
You say Texas?
I think I've missed Texas. So they're only number 1 in the country and have 2 of the best quarterbacks in the country. So you have those 6 teams right away. 6 of the top 7 teams in the country. Now, I figure at least one of them will lose a couple of games, probably lose one they shouldn't. I look at Mizzou. Will Mizzou go 8-4, 9-3? Oklahoma and LSU are also lurking too. But you've got to figure that at minimum, they're going to get 3 of those at-large spots, if not 4. And so
you're talking 5 teams, 4 to 5 teams overall from the SEC?
Yeah.
Roughly?
Yeah. At least.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And legitimately, I've watched them now a lot closer than I have before. The Big Ten has one team that's in that neighborhood in Ohio State, another that's could be in that neighborhood, and they proved it on Saturday, and that's Oregon. And then is Penn State, is Iowa, is USC in that conversation? USC to an extent has proven that, but let's go see you do it again, against Michigan. And Penn State did in the opener. They did not look good against Bowling Green. What do they do this week? So there's teams that are like flawed in the Big Ten. And then you look at the Big 12, and I think there's good teams there, but are they worthy of the playoff? Is Iowa State, is Oklahoma State, Kansas State, Utah. Those are in the conversation, but are they that good? The ACC to me looks like Miami, and that's it. So Notre Dame, can they get back in there? That's going to depend on something. So overall, Rob, I think the Big Ten looks like to me that at most they might get 3 at-larges, but probably more like 2. So you've got to be a 10-2 team. And let's say you go to Columbus and you lose. You got to lose and look like, hey, you're not that far off. Maybe it's like we saw in 2013 there, where Iowa really gave its best punch and just couldn't pull it out. It was like 34-24. If you go in there and you lose in Columbus by 10, people are going to, and you dominate Minnesota, you'll still have a crack. But if you go and you get beat like you did 2 years ago, it's over. You're just gonna, because then your 10-2 is going to get compared to Ole Miss's 10-2, and Penn State's 10-2, and Notre Dame's 11-1 or 10-2, and Kansas State's, and then all of a sudden you're like, yeah, Iowa does not fit the eye test in this ballpark. So overall, that's what the Iowa State game meant so much, and that's where they sit right now.
I think the interesting part of this dynamic is now more than ever before, Iowa fans have to root for Iowa State to win.
I know.
They've got, because if the Cyclones win the Big 12, then all of a sudden, you lost to them at home and you lost at Ohio State. You're at 10-2, but you lost to the two conference champions. Now you've got a case.
Yeah, exactly. It's fine if you do that. If you go with, you lose by a touchdown at Ohio State, you lose by 1 point on a 54-yard field goal to your rival that you certainly dominated for a half.
Yeah.
And really for 3 quarters, you look like the better team, and then, but you lost and you deserve to lose. But, then you got that case. But if Iowa State goes 8-4 or 7-5 and look to be the 4th best team in that league, then you better be rolling after Ohio State. And they're capable of that. I mean, the schedule is certainly set up for them to be at worst very, very competitive, and at best to be in a position where they can roll off, several wins with relative ease. I mean, Washington at home, this is not Washington from last year. At Michigan State, there's a lot of question marks. They're playing better.
They're a little better than I thought they'd be, but still, Iowa, if it's going to be a college football playoff team, should win that game.
Exactly. Northwestern at home. Again, last year was a fist fight. You can still have fist fights here, but there's going to have to be some separation. Wisconsin at home. Wisconsin does not look the part right now. At UCLA, you better roll UCLA. You know why? Because Indiana did, and they're going to be at least 6-0 going into the Nebraska game. So you got to compete with everybody else, and style points matter. All that being said, in my opinion, Rob, based on what I've seen thus far, is they're not that far off from that. It's about consistency on offense. It's about consistency passing the football. And then it's about defense, cleaning up the mistakes. And I know that sounds very coach speaky, but it's the truth. It really is, because whether it's Phil leaving TJ Hall out to hang, or if it's not Quinn Schulte getting over to cover the deepest player, or Sebastian Castro and Quinn Schulte going with one inside receiver and letting the fastest guy on the field get past their most inexperienced defensive back, you got to figure out things. If it's Phil or it's the players, it's their execution, something's got to change or something's got to improve. And I'm sure that they did so this week.
Yeah, they certainly they put Quinn Schulte and Jay Higgins, guys of many snaps in college football, out there on Tuesday to talk about it. And they did not shy away from it at all. They were like, that is the emphasis this week.
Yeah.
Is communication.
Mm-hmm.
They feel it's communication that will clean up those problems. And hopefully they're right. I have faith in them. Certainly the track record speaks for itself with the Iowa defense, and they have had hiccups before, and they seem to smooth things out. So not that concerned about it at all.
Last year against Western Michigan, they gave up a 40-yard plus pass and a 50-yard plus yard pass. So that was against the worst team on their schedule.
Yep.
And then they were able to rebound nicely after that. These things happen. This is why Iowa plays the schedule it does early, and doesn't go out and let's go play Bama right off the bat, because it's a building program. Even with all that experience, there's hiccups. So they take care of those. They clean it up. They do all the little things that we roll our eyes about and don't really want to write, but it's the truth. And then voila. Maybe I'm seeing things but I guess from just covering this program as long as I have and knowing the players that they have in place and the coaches that are there, this is the typical, climb for Iowa. I would be very surprised if all of a sudden they gave up 3 really long passes to Minnesota this week. I mean, maybe they give up, maybe they grind out some drives, but if they do, it's still going to be a low scoring game for Minnesota anyway.
Yeah, I agree. No doubt. All right. This is a good break spot for us, I think. Then we can move into the Minnesota-Iowa preview a little bit more. Certainly talk quarterbacks. Yeah. But first, we're going to take a break. And we'll start that off by letting you know that support for this podcast comes from Systems Unlimited, celebrating 50 years of providing services to people living with disabilities, and mental health needs throughout East Central Iowa. A list of their services and upcoming events can be found at sui.org. That is sui.org. We'll hear from a few more sponsors right now, and Scott and I will be back on the other side to talk some Floyd. Hang in there. Hey, folks, welcome back to the Hawk Fanatic, Hawkeye Hotspot podcast. Did you know that switching is easy? Well, it is. We do it all the time. We switch on the lights. We switch TV channels. Some of us switch partners while square dancing. Well, that's a stretch, but what's not a stretch is how you can switch and save with State Farm. In fact, State Farm agent Chad Birch right here in Iowa can switch you over so you can start saving today. Chad and his team are ready to welcome you to the State Farm neighborhood. With Chad Birch, it's easy to switch and save. Just give him a call when you want the real deal. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Last one, well, almost last one, second to last one. Hardcore Hawkeye fans, got to have a Kinnick Scoreboard Entertainment Center. Contact Fanatics Furniture at 319-750-0005 or KNICK3615 at gmail.com. Scoreboard Entertainment Centers. Be hardcore. 319-750-0005 or KNICK3615 at gmail.com. So I got those 2 reads. Still do not have a read from Black Angel Restaurant in downtown Iowa City, but they are sponsoring it. You'll find their ad on hawkfanatic.com. Black Angel, downtown Iowa City. Check them out. Actually, it's not downtown. It's on Governor in Iowa. So not far. It's a walk. If you're
Dodge. It's Dodge. Yeah.
Dodge. I did it again.
Yeah.
We'll get this right at some point this season.
I got it wrong before. So
Scott has and his daughter have been to Black Angel. They endorse the restaurant. I've been to the Perez family restaurants in the past, El Banditos, Perez Tacos. I endorse those. I'm guessing the Black Angel is also an excellent place to dine, and we'll eventually get there myself here at some point this fall, but I recommend it for you. And if you're in town for a Hawkeye football game, certainly get a chance, get over there, check out the Black Angel. You will not be disappointed. All right, Scott. They say quarterbacks get too much credit and too much blame and are talked about too much. But I think it's justified in this case with Iowa. It is the story right now. If you look at Iowa's offensive line looks pretty good. I think the receivers are coming along. Jacob Gill's been a revelation. Running backs, obviously, Scott mentioned Caleb Johnson's been as good as any back in the country. You need consistent quarterback play. It was better, at least from an efficiency standpoint, against Troy, but you're going to need more in the Big Ten. And now, Scott, we go into the Big Ten play with what's the plan? Is the plan to let McNamara get him to the red zone and then put Brendan Sullivan in moving forward? Was that just for the Troy game? Listening to Kirk after the game and then again on Tuesday, he seems pretty committed to McNamara being his guy and maybe using Sullivan if he feels like it's the right time. But this still feels like McNamara's gig by quite a bit, at least from my vantage point.
It is. And I think he made it clear after the game. He made it clear on Tuesday that that's the situation, and that's understandable. I mean, he is when you go 19-23, you answer some questions, especially after a really bad, 3 quarters against Iowa State. It's just with Cade, and this is kind of the offense in general. It's about consistency. It's about you're not going to be perfect. You're not going to be great every quarter of action, but you've got to make sure that your worst isn't so bad. So therefore there's not a big difference between a bad quarter or a bad half and a good quarter and a good half, because Iowa State, he was 8 of 11 in the first quarter against Iowa State, and then he was 5 of 18 for 27 yards in the final 3 quarters. That's just too extreme. You just can't have that. But against Troy, 19-23. I mean, for the season, he's at almost 64% completion percentage. That is exactly what you want. The numbers collectively are good. It's just about making the makeables when they're available. And that not only is Cade being able to be more accurate and use his legs when he throws and tries to do more fundamentally, which he's getting a little bit better at, but it's still kind of a work in progress there. But it's also about, and Tim Lester will be the first one to say it, that it's about Tim Lester figuring out how do we put him in the best position to make plays? How do we put our receivers in the best spot that, okay, maybe it's not a home run ball, but maybe it's a crosser that gets us 5 or 6 yards. Making sure you make the makeables, you do the easy things. I think they're on that path, and I think Cade McNamara is your guy. I was less certain of that, obviously, a month ago. I think we all were, and I think first half against Illinois State we weren't. he was 8 of 17. Then second half he was 13 of 14. It's just, can you straighten it out and not go 5 of 18, but go 9 of 18? It's a bad half, but it's not, oh my God, this is horrible. And I think that's something
two bad first halves, one bad second half, right?
Yeah.
Well, actually, Iowa State was bad 3 quarters. But
yeah.
From McNamara, I mean.
Right.
Iowa, it just seems, in relation to the team, they haven't put a complete game together yet. And it's 3 games in, so maybe that shouldn't be expected at this point with so many moving parts, new offensive coordinator, quarterback coming back from injury. It's explainable, certainly.
Yeah. I don't have a problem with, quarters where you don't score, quarters where you don't do anything, because the other team's pretty good too, and that's going to happen, and you can't expect them to win 40-0 on every game, because somebody's going to say, well, why didn't you score this other time? I remember specifically one argument I got into was, remember Nate Stanley's first road start was at Iowa State in 17, and he throws 5 touchdown passes and they win in overtime. And I remember just distinctly getting in arguments with people going, well, he should have had 8, and he did overthrow some guys. But I'm also like, they had a 10-point deficit in the fourth quarter. He leads them back. They go to overtime and they win. He throws the game-winning touchdown pass. You can't. Yeah, exactly. Amir, his second touchdown. I mean, one was like stretched out in the fourth quarter. The other one was that out route.
Yep.
From the line of scrimmage, and well called play, well executed, and you look at that, and that's what people are going to have to remember, that the other team cares about winning too. Just because you love the Hawks doesn't mean that the Badgers are going, well, they love the Hawks so much, so we're going to give it up. I mean, it's just, there's a tug of war. And I look at Cade and I think that the players do believe in him. That's number one, is a quarterback, because otherwise you're not going to be the captain if you're not.
Right.
Two, that he does have kind of a swagger to him that carries, but your play has to ensure that people continue to follow you, because Spencer had the same thing in a different way. And I think with Cade, if he can continue to make the makeables, lead them on drives, and then boom, Caleb Johnson for 40 yards, then all is well. I mean, better than well, because when we're looking back a year ago, even with Cade McNamara in the offense, with before Luke Lachey got hurt and when Eric All was there, it wasn't running this good, not even close.
It scored 23 points against Minnesota the last 2 seasons.
Yeah, 12 yards of the second half.
So obviously, this again, different teams than the last 2 seasons, but Minnesota historically is decent on defense. And we'll talk more about Minnesota. As we said, Scott, we have an advantage. We have somebody who actually has seen Minnesota in person.
Yeah.
I will let me run through a few of these real quick here, and then we'll get some insight from you. Couple notes here on Minnesota. Co-offensive coordinator Greg Harbaugh Jr. was the wide receivers coach at Western Michigan in 2020 and 21, when Iowa offensive coordinator Tim Lester was the Broncos head coach. It was also Lester who took over WMU when PJ Fleck became Minnesota's head coach. So a little connection there.
Yeah.
If you're looking for that Minnesota receiver that can do damage to you, his name would be Daniel Jackson. We've had Rashad Bateman in the past. You know the greatest hits of Minnesota wide receivers that have torched Iowa.
Yeah.
Look out for Daniel Jackson. Max Brosmer, excuse me. Brosmer. Bro. It's the bro. It's the man's here.
The man's here. Yeah, the bro.
All right. Yes. Max Brosmer, 6-year quarterback from New Hampshire. So Iowa has 2 quarterbacks on its roster that have played Big Ten road games. Minnesota has 0 quarterbacks on its roster that has played a Big Ten game, believe it or not. So some interesting things there. We'll see what we get from Brosmer. With obviously Iowa's defense is the best he's faced. North Carolina is not a slouch by any means, but this is certainly a degree up in difficulty for him. If you're looking for the running back, all the greatest hits of the running backs that have burned Iowa in the past. His name would be Darius Taylor, who's visited here a few times recruiting-wise. I think he's from Detroit. Missed the first game, so Scott did not get a chance to see him play, but he's come back for 188 yards and 3 touchdowns on just 25 carries, and he's caught a touchdown pass. And then from a defensive standpoint for the Gophers, very balanced, at least 10 different Gophers with at least 8 tackles, 12 different Gophers with at least a tackle for loss. 7 different Gophers have sacks, and 6 different Gophers have interceptions. So pretty balanced on defense. They obviously have some guys that are standouts, but they get by with kind of a collective effort there on defense as well. Just kind of a synopsis, Scott. What's your take on Minnesota, not only from the first game you saw, but maybe what you've seen since then against, who the heck was it? Fordham or somebody?
It was Rhode Island and Nevada.
Yeah, it was Rhode Island, Fordham, same thing.
Yeah, and it pretty much was the same thing. I mean, they've got shutouts the last 2 games. Yeah. Now, take it for what it's worth. Let's put it that way. I mean, yes. Nevada is probably worse than any team that's on Iowa's schedule, and that includes Illinois State, Rhode Island.
Nevada did win at Troy, though, didn't they?
Yeah, that's true. It's no. Wait a minute. Did they?
I don't remember. Anyway, I thought maybe they did. Didn't Nevada play Troy the first week? Maybe not. I don't know. They're not good, though.
Yeah. Let's see. I have Troy's notes still down here. So let's look that up. No, they won in the opener. I guess Nevada won by 2 points. So, I stand corrected.
I still think, Scott, like I said earlier in the podcast, I don't think we know enough about either one of these teams, Minnesota or Iowa.
Yeah.
They both tripped up against their good opponent and beat up on the bad ones.
Yeah. This is just not – it's a team that's got some questions. I think they have some strengths, and that's probably a better place to start. Brosmer was a FCS All-American last year at New Hampshire. He'd been there 5 years, had a really good run, and he just said, I had to sit down with him for about 10 minutes when I was doing the story on PJ Fleck, and he was just kind of like, I just wanted to test myself at a different level, and Minnesota came about, and he went and entered the portal that way. But nothing against New Hampshire, but you get it. Everybody gets it. Darius Taylor is really good, no question. He is. It's hard to compare him with. He's such a different running back than Caleb Johnson, but he's one that he's got NFL capability. So now, is he better than Mo Ibrahim? I wouldn't say that at this level, not right now. Mo was fantastic. But Daniel Jackson is really good. He was a second team All Big Ten guy last year. And you think about the receivers in the league, just to be in that top 4 discussion. And he was the only real player on either offense who did anything last year in that game. He had a couple of big plays. And so he's a guy you got to be cognizant of. And then their left tackle, Erante Ursary, is considered a potential first-round pick. So he's got a lot of accolades. Is he that good? We'll see. We'll see how he handles Iowa. I'm anxious to see that. But he is considered one of the better players in the country at his position, and somebody who is getting a lot of first-round love for the NFL draft. Defensively, they've had 2 straight shutouts. I saw them against North Carolina. They looked, they were pretty tenacious, very physical, as you'd expect. They've got some. They remind me a lot of Iowa. Not just in the way they play, or the style that they play, but just personality wise. They're very physical that way. I mean, their best linebacker is Cody Lindenberg, and he's kind of a freak. He's a middle linebacker. I would say, it would be a good comparison for him. Jay isn't a bad comparison. Seth Benson isn't a bad comparison. Somebody like that, that's okay. And the guy can play, no question. And he's probably a little more athletic than both of them. And then Danny Strigo, who's on the edge, is a good player. They've got some decent linemen. And, one thing to watch, Darius Green as a safety is a good player. Justin Wally has been a 4-year starter at corner, and he's kind of iffy. It wouldn't surprise me at all if 4:30 rolls around and he's not playing, and that would be a big loss for them. But think of it as just like playing them last year, that they're capable of hanging in the game and being very physical with Iowa, both sides of the line of scrimmage, both the defense and everything. They frankly should have beat North Carolina. I know, their kicker, who was first team All Big Ten last year, missed 2 field goals. One was close, the other was a little longer at the gun, and then they shot a fireworks anyway, accidentally. And then it was like, what are you doing? It's just like the most Minnesota thing, And you can't, in this series, Rob, as we know, you cannot underestimate the value of the pig. It does matter. It matters intensely for Iowa and for Minnesota. Minnesota has it for the first time since 2014. I saw their trophy case. I took a picture of it. It's in there. They care about it, and they'll talk about it all week long. And so, and for Iowa, not having the pig is a reminder that you did not win this game. And as we know, this series has so many marks, which is why it's a rivalry and why I'm glad it exists. And, I thought we'd leave the timeouts here and take the pig with us, to Jack Campbell's touchdown that got called back for some stupid reason, to last year Cooper DeJean's moment, and then, scrambling the goalposts, trying to take them out of the stadium, to the original reason for the pig to begin with.
Don't forget Brian Ferentz's press box.
Yes. Oh, I can't. Were you upstairs or were you on the field?
That was when I used to shoot the first half and then come up and work in the press box in the second half. I was getting off the elevator when that was happening. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? I guess I put down on the field all game. Just imagine coming off the elevator and hearing that. Just how out of the ordinary, let alone how loud it was. But yeah, this series, man, has got some very interesting history and storylines that happen on and off the field.
Yeah, right. Let's see. There's the bathroom incident in 08. While Iowa was scoring on the field, its fans were scoring in the bathroom. 55
Was that in the
to
dome?
Yeah, that was the last Gopher game in the dome there.
Yeah.
55-0.
Yeah.
I mean, just on and on and on and on. There's always something with these two teams, and it's fantastic. It is. This is college football at its best. Not that these teams are both great, and let's face it, Rob, in our lifetime, will Iowa win a national title? Probably not. Will Minnesota? Absolutely not. But these teams, does that matter? Otherwise, you might as well just say, you know what, we're never going to watch these games. If they're not going to win the national title, I don't care. No, these games matter because their shared histories go back to 1890. I mean, they've played at baseball stadiums in Cedar Rapids. They came here and they played for a live pig the first year because there was a threat of a riot, because of injury sustained by a black Iowa running back named Ozzie Simmons, who was beat up. And then Minnesota's claiming that was just the way we played versus, no, that was racially motivated. And the governor of Iowa gets involved and says, well, if the officials don't take care of it, I'm sure the fans will. And of course, that got some serious play. That was on every front page in the country, in the Midwest for sure, and then every sports front page in the country going into that game. I mean, Minnesota threatened to, sever all relations with Iowa. Their hotel was in Rock Island, Illinois, and then Floyd Olson, bless his heart, sends a telegram to Clyde Herring saying, I think you were just trying to get our goat. Let's play for a pig. And Rosedale Farms supplied a champion boar, 200-pound Hampshire pig, and he got to ride on a special cart all the way to St. Paul, Minnesota. And I've seen his resting place and outside of Mabel, Minnesota, under a little spruce tree.
God has done some research on this series. Stay tuned.
Yeah.
Perhaps something down the road.
Well, let's hope I get that done.
But yes, and I encourage folks to maybe Google Ozzie Simmons and find out who he was. He's a pretty important part of this rivalry, so to speak. So everybody involved should know who he is. Where do we want to go with this next, Scott? It seems like for me, this is almost settled into what Wisconsin and Iowa had been before Fickle rock fights. This seems like it sets up like another one of those, tug of wars, 4 quarters. I think if one team's going to win decisively, it would be Iowa. But I just don't see a blowout in this one. I think this is one that's decided in the second half, probably fourth quarter, where a play here or a play there, not a fair catch. Something. Hopefully it's nothing that controversial, but I think it's going to be something like that late in the game where somebody makes a play. I kind of believe this or not, as critical as I've been, I like Iowa's quarterback spot here better than Minnesota's just because of the experience level of playing in the Big Ten. And that's no disrespect to Brosmer at all. Maybe he comes out and lights Iowa's defense up. But this is going to be a different experience for him than he faced at New Hampshire. So I'm a slight lean for Minnesota or for Iowa, Scott. I think I've got it 17-13 Iowa. And I don't know, maybe it's a turnover late. Maybe it's a field goal. Maybe it's a return, something like that. Something odd, something memorable, because it's Iowa, Minnesota, and there's always something memorable.
I've tried to kind of compare these teams in the past and how they've played, because every game but one since 19, and every game but 2 since Fleck has taken over, they've been very close competitive games. And even, there was the year when they were ranked 8th and Iowa won at Kinnick. And there was even the first time when Noah Fant caught a 50-yard pass and started throwing in the end zone and stuff like that. And, so how do these teams compare? And then I even look back like the 16 game where Akram Wadley has a 60-yard run for a touchdown and they win 14-7. And, that was a total rock fight. I think Iowa's better than they were then that year, both sides of the ball, frankly. I like Iowa maybe a little more decisively in going there. In part because we know how this team kind of galvanizes around, they rally around themselves really well. And playing at home is good for Iowa, of course, but playing on the road sometimes gives them that togetherness, that bond, that us against the world. And you're going against a place where they literally have a chant of who hates Iowa, we hate Iowa. And you're playing for a purpose and not, you're actually playing for something tangible, which is, of course, Floyd. I love this thing. And you're playing for Floyd. You're playing for a symbol of victory. And you also have all these things built up, but they should have confidence in the way they've played. It's like it's now about consistency. It's like give up, don't allow the big plays on defense and we're fine. Offensively, we're pushing, we're pressing, we're doing the right things. It's just ironing out some things. You still got
turn it over. Yeah. Just don't turn it over. That was a positive last week.
Yeah, exactly. Their penalties are down, their turnovers are down. So they're running the game, running the ball well. They're completing passes. It's going to be more difficult, but at night, at a place where it's you're on the road, but it's, as we know, Iowa fans travel to this one better than any of the others.
Yep.
I like this one 20-10, but I think there's a potential for it to turn into Iowa flipping it and running away with it too. And part of it, I do think Minnesota's got a good team, but they've had good teams in the past, and Iowa's just been better. And this isn't Minnesota from 19 when they had Bateman and Tyler Johnson and those guys that, I thought they were a really good team there. I thought they were better in Iowa at times. But this one, I think Iowa is the better team. And if Iowa plays well, Iowa at least doubles them up, if not more.
Is there one area that you're looking at or one aspect of the game that you feel like could turn it? Is there one advantage Iowa has distinctly over Minnesota?
Even though Minnesota has shut out two teams, I think Iowa's defense is built for Minnesota. And now it's going to have to handle the line of scrimmage. And at times they've given up some ground to Minnesota running the ball, but last year wasn't one of them. Mm-hmm. I don't know that this line is like it was a couple of years ago where it was really big and they were able to really lean against Iowa, like 2 years ago when it was -1 with wind chill up there, and Mo Ibrahim was just running all over the place. Even then, Iowa was able to kind of keep it condensed. I don't know that Max Brosmer has faced a defense like this.
That's
because New Hampshire, you're not facing anybody like this. North Carolina, nice team, 7-5. They're going to go to take your pick on whatever bowl, and they fit fifth in the ACC. I don't think Nevada's going to a bowl game. Rhode Island, I don't know that they're even going to go to the FCS playoffs. But I think he's got the potential where if he thinks he sees something and it's not there, Iowa could really take advantage of it. And that's where I think it could snowball. That if he makes mistakes, and PJ knows that. I listened to his press conference this week, and he knows what to expect from Iowa. And I think he's kind of the thing that we're not talking and nearly enough about is how good Lester has flipped this offense, and also just the running game for Iowa. I mean, the fact that Caleb Johnson's leading the country in rushing yards is tremendous. The fact that I charted their motion, and they run motion at about 26% of their snaps. Iowa does. They've already almost exceeded what Brian Ferentz did last 4 years. And even though the numbers were good, we talked about them when they were running motion, that they just didn't want to do it. Now they're wanting to do it, and the numbers are, they're averaging 5.1 yards per carry when they got motion, but they're averaging 5.9 overall because people now are seeing motion enough that they don't know which way to go. And they're waiting for the motion, and it's not there, and so they're getting beat. And then when it comes, then they start to panic a little bit at the second level. Lester's done a magnificent job with this offense so far, and he's leaned into 12 personnel. He's run 12 personnel twice as much as Brian Ferentz did. So I really like
the green zone with Cade Piper coming in and just going big jumbo there. I like that too, because I think that's what you should lean into who you are, and that's who Iowa is.
Exactly. Be physical. pound away. And the mid zone run that they've incorporated, which is it's more tackle than wide, has been a godsend for this team. It has been just the best run that they could come up with, because it's enabled guys like Connor Colby. Their aiming points are different. They used to aim for play side number. Now they're aiming for screws, which is the helmet. Mm-hmm. And so they're getting to that point. And I mean, you're talking about a foot to a foot and a half difference, but just where you're aiming is just a little bit different. And you can get into your guy. And then Caleb Johnson doesn't, when he's stretching, he's negating all of his abilities, which are, he's a power back, power mixed with just explosion. Now he can just take it and go. And he takes it at a slant, then he can stick his foot in the ground and go, instead of dragging it out and then trying to cut up. Well, as we saw in the past so many times, linebackers would undercut the guards, or they already knew where the spot was and they'd meet them there. This has been a real godsend, and this is all Tim Lester's scheme. People may not see it differently, but I've watched it enough and documented this. I wrote about it today, that it is completely different, and the proficiency is off the charts compared to where they were last year.
And Caleb, he's tough to take down anyway because of his size, and when he gets some momentum going and power behind it, and when you're running that mid zone and he's running at an angle, it makes it that much harder because the linebacker's coming laterally instead of meeting him head on. So you're trying to take him down from an angle, and he's fast too. So yeah, I agree with you. I love what I've seen so far in the running game. Would like to see some explosive plays in the passing game. Maybe that's coming this week. But feeling that Caleb Brown may be a big part of this week's game plan. It's been quiet so far, but very talented kid, and this would be a game where I think he could get off.
Yeah, they haven't run a lot of jet sweeps, but this is going to be what's the next phase of that, which is incorporating more motion with jet sweep, rather than jet sweep motion and then running off of that, which has been the real bonus here so far. So I really think that there's a chance this could be a much greater, that they can take this another step. And then I think the next step beyond that, and maybe you see it this week, maybe it's something they work on their bye week, is play action off that zone, and not necessarily boot, but drop back. And then you might find guys open down the field.
Yeah, it's going to be fun, I think. I like the foundation that's been built in the non-conference, and now what can they build on now in terms of what they've shown and what they still have, what they can be better at, what they like, as Scott was saying earlier, what McNamara likes when he's in there. I'm excited to see what this offense can do going into the Big Ten, because if it can be average, I think it could be a convincing win this week, and then an exciting conference season. Scott's got 20-10 Iowa. I have 17-13 Iowa. That leads us into our picks this week. Give it to me.
Hey, last week might have been my best week, Rob. And I
didn't want to hear that.
I was thanks. I was 10-3.
Wow.
Yeah, so I had a really good week. Now the games that I lost, one of them was Iowa. That was kind of a pain for me, but then the other, because it was 22.5 and ended up 17. So take away that punt return and you're good. But the other two that were the pain, they were kind of like, oh man, I really screwed that up. And we both did on these. Purdue, I'm like embarrassed on that one, and then then Virginia getting 3 against Maryland. I thought it'd be, they were at home, and they were undefeated, so I thought that they'll pull that out or something. But
I think that maybe is a piece of evidence that the ACC may not be very good this year.
Yeah, I think you're correct on that. So. We figured that out pretty quick, and so I think that's why they're a one bid league, as they say in basketball. So I do have the numbers though, but you were 6-7, so
I'll take it. For me, that's not bad.
Yeah, I mean there were some that were in that ballpark. I mean, like Washington State was really close, and some now.
Yeah, and it's harder earlier in the season too, because you're trying to get a handle on who everybody is, right? And then on top of that, you've got like Ohio State minus 58 and stuff like that you're dealing with. Okay. Oh, they only won by 56. And I picked Ohio. That's the type of stuff you get early in the year.
Yeah. See, like here was a difference. I had Illinois, you had Central Michigan. It was Illinois minus 20 and they won by 21.
Yeah.
They won 30-9, so it was just like, okay.
That's why I really don't gamble with my own money very often.
Yeah. Those are tough. So first game, and we're going to go right into Big Ten action on Friday night. And this is a ranked matchup. So I'm kind of intrigued by this. Illinois at Nebraska, and Nebraska minus 7.5 at home. That you got the hook, but I'm going to go with Nebraska. I kind of, even though Illinois has played well thus far, what do they really stand on? I mean, I like Caden Fagan. Obviously, Iowa did too, but I don't know. There's something about Nebraska that I'm starting to really think that they might be. I'm not talking playoff for real, but I'm talking minimum 8 wins for real.
Yeah, they look good. I watched them on Saturday night and haven't caught a lot of Illinois yet, but I don't know as Illinois' offense can do enough against Nebraska. And Friday night in Lincoln, in that place, that's a tough place to play. I'll take Nebraska. I don't like the hook, but that's why they put it on there.
Yeah, I know. So we're kind of going, ugh. All right. Starting off on Saturday, Charlotte's Web at they should merge with Gardner Webb and be Charlotte's Web at Indiana minus 28.5 for the Hoosiers at home, who obviously won by 29 the other day against UCLA. I'm going to go Indiana just because I don't think Kirk Cignetti has a nice guy gene to him.
No, I don't think he'll take his foot off the gas until the final horn sounds. So I'll take Indiana as well. That's that. You talk about what can you learn early in the season. What we learned is Indiana's going to run it up if it can.
Yeah, this isn't Kirk Ferentz where you're going. Fourth quarter, they're just going to run the ball and punt, and then the other team gets a junk touchdown at the end and blows it up. I mean, this is like, no, we're going to keep scoring. We're going to go score 77 on that poor team from Western Illinois. Villanova at Maryland minus 19.5 was. I had to find it on a special site since it was a FCS.
What is it? Only 19?
19.5. Yeah, Villanova. They're pretty decent.
Must be decent.
Yeah, they're decent for an FCS.
How long?
Yeah, exactly. Jay Wright.
I will. I'm going to take. I'm going to throw the points in this one.
All right, so you're going to take Maryland.
Yep.
I'm going to take Villanova. I think Maryland wins, but I think it might be. Yeah, 19.5 might be a lot there. It might be I don't know, 31-20 or something like that.
I'll probably Maryland will win by 18.
Yeah. Marshall at Ohio State minus 39.5.
This is what I was just talking about.
Yeah, exactly. There's one more that's way worse.
And they win by 40.
Yeah.
Basically, you need Ohio State to win by 40, and I'll pick Ohio State to win by 40 or more.
Okay. I'm going to take Marshall because I can see this being with 30 seconds left and Marshall scores a touchdown and then it goes from being, 51-7 to 51-13 or something like that. But I don't think it's going to be close. I just think that's
the backdoor cover kick in the nuts.
Yeah, exactly. I love these. All right. The worst one. Kent State at the body bag game. This is where we're headed.
What was the score at Tennessee?
71-0.
Okay.
And it was 65-0 at halftime. Tennessee just went because they could have. It literally could have been 120-0. I mean, it was that bad. Kent State at Penn State minus 48.5. I'm going to go Penn State. That's a heavy number, but based on what I saw with Kent State. I don't know. Maybe I'll eat these words. Maybe Kent State will, we're going to play a little bit better. And James Franklin will take
I hope they play better.
Yeah.
I'm going to take Penn State too. I'm going to stay with this trend of throwing ridiculously large numbers in this week.
Yeah, this one could end up 71-0. Yeah. All right. UCLA And they haven't deserved UCLA. They don't deserve Los Angeles. They're UCLA.
They got some work to do out there in Westwood with that program.
They might just want to go to basketball season. And by the way, basketball schedule comes out today.
That's right.
Yeah. UCLA, UCLA at LSU minus 24.5. And I'm going LSU.
Yeah, me too. I'll stay with this throwing the big numbers.
Yeah, they were just I don't have a lot of faith in them. I think this could be a really bad year for them. All right, this one is a good game. Rutgers at Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech minus 3.5. Give me Rutgers, baby. I'm buying the Scarlet Knights.
Yeah, I'm going against the ACC, bro.
Yeah. Yeah. Big Ten playing the smackdown. As my son used to say growing up, and now I can't get it out of my head, Northern Western. Northwestern. He always called it Northern Western. So it just makes me smile. At Washington, minus 10.5 for the Huskies.
Wow.
Give me the Wildcats, baby.
Yeah, I'm gonna. Me as well. I don't think Washington's good enough to cover that.
Yeah, I know. I mean, Wazoo's better than they are. Wazoo's a pretty good team. They're a team that's going to could screw up the playoff just because they don't have an automatic bid, and they actually could go undefeated. But still, I don't know. I don't think Washington's all that good this year. They're going to take some time to grow. Michigan State at Boston College minus 6.5 for Boston College, and I'm going to throw the points. I'm take BC.
I take BC too. It looks like Bill O'Brien's getting it going there. It's good to see.
Yeah. They looked all right against Missouri. They had a bad quarter, and otherwise they might have pulled that out. Okay, both of these teams are hurting for certain. Purdue or Perdone or Perdun at Oregon State. Oregon State, which got annihilated 49-14 by Oregon last week, minus 4.5 for the Beavers. I'm going to take the Beavers on this one. I think their offensive line's still pretty good. They just ran into a very motivated opponent that finally decided to play some football.
Yeah, I was off on that one. I had a terrible read on that. I had the Beavers being competitive at home, and they weren't. I think they will be this week and competitive enough to cover that number. Ain't no way I'm betting on Purdue after last week.
Yeah, I'm going to wait on that too. This one, the craziest line I've probably ever seen, and somebody will fill me in that there are different ones, but USC minus 5.5 at Michigan. It's opened up at Michigan minus 10.5, or the earlier number was.
Wow.
I don't know. That was before the season, I think. But now it's USC minus 5.5, and I'm taking the Trojans.
I'll take Michigan. It's in the Big House.
It's at the Big House
With 5.5. I'll take Michigan. I think Michigan it plays its best game of the year. I think it's going to be up for this one.
Okay, that's great. And finally, we already gave our scores, but just for the listeners who may have been zoning out or at a stoplight or something, Iowa minus 2.5 at Minnesota. I'm going Iowa 20-10, and I'm throwing the 2.5.
Yeah, and I've got Iowa 17-13, so I will throw the 2.5 as well.
Yeah, it's funny when I was up there. It was North Carolina was 1.5 point favorite against Minnesota, and it was 19-17. Minnesota missed the field goal in the end of the game. But anyway, so all right.
Well, that's it. That'll do it, folks. If you're smart, as I say each week, follow Scott. I had a good second week, but that was an aberration. As we saw last week, who knows, Bo? I may bounce back, right? You never know. All right, folks. Well, we got to get Scott out of here. He's got a meeting coming up in a few minutes. We appreciate everybody listening. Thank you so much to our sponsors. Enjoy the game this weekend. If you're going to Minneapolis, behave yourself. As we said, weird stuff happens in this rivalry. Do not get yourself in trouble in the bathroom or any of that stuff. Be good. All right, folks. Have a good weekend. Scott and I will be back to talk to you next week. Even though it's the bye week, we'll come up with something fun to talk about. You know we will. Be well. Talk to you soon. Say goodbye, Scott.
Goodbye, Scott.